Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Dr. Poonam Gulalia. I am faculty with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. The paper is Fieldwork and Field Supervision, and the module that we are going to discuss today is titled Students' Understanding and Use of Self in the Fieldwork Program. When we begin the fieldwork program, we have a lot of doubts and apprehensions because we come from varied backgrounds and our questioning is limited to the syllabus, the course curriculum of our undergraduate days, our school and college days, which is very structured course. Here in the fieldwork program, when we speak of the need to understand the use of self, that is one of the primary objectives of this module which we are going to cover. Second, of course, is to understand the meaning of self-development, growth, and self-awareness in the context of our learning in the field as a part of the fieldwork curriculum. Third is to understand the meaning of being perceptive, to understand the value of sensitivity, and to understand how this pans out in the field. Keeping these objectives in mind, the module has been designed in such a way that after the introduction to this, we speak of the need of the conscious use of self, the meaning of the term conscious use of self in the field, use of self and strategies which need to be deployed by us, utilized by us as student learners, learnt by us as student learners, to undertake the fieldwork as part of our curriculum, and also to be able to differentiate between the meaning of self-awareness and conscious use of self. These are the three primary aspects which we will dwell on in this module. Once we use the term conscious use of self, sometimes students are very intimidated that why do I need to worry about myself in going for fieldwork? If fieldwork is the learning by doing aspect, then all I need to do is to engage with the field, to engage with the agency's mandate, to engage with the tasks and activities given to me by my field contacts and my supervisors. But the fact is that conscious use of self is important in the context of the helping relationship. Since fieldwork is a helping profession, social work is a helping profession, and field work is part of understanding the need for why we are in a helping relationship. We also need to simultaneously grasp the meaning and the importance of the concept of self. We need to understand the difference between self-awareness and conscious use of self. And in understanding this, we will appreciate that the skill of the social worker, the skill which the student social worker needs to learn in creating, in maintaining, and in sustaining a positive working relationship with the clients, with the target groups, with the beneficiaries, with the agency personnel, with the field contacts, with the supervisors. All these aspects, we require certain skills to be developed, and it is the self which is the medium through which you as a student learner will consciously be able to influence the outcome of your fieldwork. Now, we need to also appreciate that social work practice involves conscious and deliberate use of oneself. So, we need to be conscious of the way we are as persons, and therefore our understanding of human behavior, our understanding of our backgrounds, our understanding of our socialization, our understanding of our upbringing. So many aspects become important for us to see how we connect with people in the field. So you as a student learner become the medium through which the knowledge that you have gained, the knowledge that you are gaining, the information that you are gathering, the attitudes which you are picking up, the attitudes which you need to change, the attitudes which you need to modify, and the skills which you need to learn are all conveyed. Therefore, the need to discuss conscious use of self. You know, sometimes some of our own personal values, our personal beliefs, our personal approaches to the field, to marginalized groups, to working with people, to others, whether they are less qualified or more qualified, whether they're less educated or more educated, our attitudes, these are all revealed when we connect with people. So when we develop well-meaning, healthy working relationships, we need to be conscious of this and not be ignorant of our prejudices and biases which tend to creep in because of our own backgrounds, our own socialization, our own reasons for not having addressed these issues earlier. You know, there's a body known as National Association for Social Workers. Now this body has laid down certain criteria for cultural competence. Now what is cultural competence and what is its importance in the field work program? Why is it that we need to understand what it means by our behaviors, our attitudes and the policies? All of this come together in an organization among professionals, among paraprofessionals who are in the field, and all of these in a congruence enable the system, whether it's the organizations or the professionals who are working together in cross-cultural situations. So the backgrounds and the culture from which we come from may not necessarily be the realities and may not necessarily be the values and the beliefs practiced by the group of people, by the target group, by the client group, by the communities we work with. So it becomes important for us to be mindful of this, to be abreast of this, and to appreciate the importance of multicultural identities which people have when we work in the field. We need to be mindful of knowing and acknowledging our own ignorance, our own fears and inhibitions, and what are the values which we carry, the attitudes which we carry when we connect with people. All these become part of the conscious use of self. So, if we are mindful of what it means and why is it important for the conscious use of self, why is it important to develop and be conscious of our own selves when working in the field, then we will be able to appreciate the strategies which we need to employ, the techniques which we need to be careful of or we need to cultivate in order to develop conscious use of self. So these strategies include impact both the personal self and the professional self. These strategies are such which we try and inculcate in the pre-placement exercises we undertake as part of the fieldwork program, which are called skill laboratory building exercises, which are spread out over a series of 3 to 4 weeks, which enable the process of coming to terms with oneself, coming to terms with what we mean by self-awareness, coming to terms with where and how we are in the trajectory of our own growth and development, in terms of our mental faculties, in terms of our connecting with people, in terms of our communicating with others, in terms of accepting others' points of view, others' lifestyles, others' cultural criteria, others' way of thinking and others' way of living. So all these aspects become important when we discuss the personal self. When we speak of group lab exercises, which are undertaken in a few schools of social work, but which are now being taken up in a big way and being discussed in departments of social work, which have seen the value of these exercises, we begin to appreciate that these group lab exercises provide simulated situations in human situations, simulated human situations where reflections are carried out under the guidance of mentors, supervisors and faculty in a relatively safe environment. In-house, through peer learning, through group exercises which are undertaken in small groups, processes of observations, feedback, and opportunity are provided to students who have enrolled in the master's program of social work as a pre-placement orientation to the fieldwork program. So before we undertake fieldwork placement, before we are allocated our fieldwork agencies, before we actually go to the field, and while we are observing and being part of exposure visits, institutional visits, we also simultaneously undertake our part of these group lab exercises, which are planned exercises where peer support is available, facilitation is available, some introspection is possible, and we begin to come to terms with our personal selves. So, having discussed the importance of personal self, having discussed the importance of group lab exercises in facilitating this process of coming to terms with the personal self, we come to another term known as self-development. Why is self-development important? What is self-development and how is it relevant for our fieldwork is what we are going to discuss now. Self-development essentially is a sum total of many aspects. These are qualities or abilities that one possesses which are used to maximize one's own effectiveness in the field as a functioning individual. When we are aspiring to be a social worker, we need to look at self-development in the context of having a very realistic self-concept, having a very realistic image of oneself, implying thereby that we need to be having a positive and healthy appreciation of oneself. We need to be mindful of our understanding of our own capacities and limitations, of our own strengths and limitations, and being in the process of overcoming the unrealistic ideas which we may have of ourselves. It also implies being able to acquire an internal control of oneself, indicating thereby the ability to define oneself independently. Taking this further, we need to understand the cognitive, the affective, and the behavioral aspects of ourselves, being alert and sensitive to one's own feelings, being able to see one's own emotional responses to situations, being able to see whether we are sensitive to the other, and also being able to develop a range of behavioral capacities which are appropriate to the varied situations which we are likely to encounter in the field. Having covered the meaning of and the value of self-development, we come to the need to focus further on why we need to have an understanding of the self. We need to understand the self more and more because it helps us in understanding our own identity, in shaping our own self in relation to the field workers, to the field realities, to the social realities, to the development sector, to the people who work in the development sector. So if we are not conscious of ourselves and our own identity, we will be unable to appreciate and understand the identity and selves of the other in this context. Understanding oneself also implies knowing the factors, the forces, the features which build our own confidence and enable us to give our best to the student learning experience which we are going to undertake in the fieldwork agency which will be allocated to us. When we understand and appreciate the need to focus on self-development, we also begin to accept and respect ourselves because it becomes the basis for accepting the other person's strengths, qualities, complexities, and uniqueness, and becomes equally relevant for us to connect with the field contacts, the paraprofessionals, the supervisors, all of whom will play a very relevant role in your fieldwork learning experience. Thus far, we have introduced to you the concept of self-development as well as the concept of self-awareness. It is essential to state here that self-development is a goal of every individual, and being in the social work profession, it becomes more important and more relevant that we are aware of this goal while we are undertaking the fieldwork program and when we are connecting with others in the field who are not been part of our earlier life cycle. Understanding our own perceptions to others, understanding our own perceptions to the vulnerable and the marginalized groups who will come to you in different forms through different contexts, whether it's in the concurrent fieldwork program, in the block fieldwork program, in the rural practicum study setting, or in the self-study tours which are undertaken as part of the mandate of the fieldwork exercise. So we need to be conscious of understanding our own perceptions, which is the first step in development of self. This being the first step in development of self, we need to appreciate that self-awareness is a continuous process and we need to be mindful on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a regular basis about this aspect. Once we have dwelt with these two aspects, we need to also throw some light on being what does it mean to be perceptive? What does perception mean? Perception essentially is the ability to observe details, to remember these in the context of our fieldwork program, to select the relevant among these in relevant to the people we connect with, to interpret it and to report it verbally or in writing to our supervisors, to our field contacts, to our agency personnel, to the faculty advisors and to the fieldwork secretariat. Perception is selective, but a student learner needs to be perceptive to be able to make good use of and full use of the student learning opportunity which is provided to him or her in the part of the fieldwork program. One aspect which we need to dwell on a little is attention. Our attention deficit sometimes does not help us to be effective as a student learner. Why is attention such an important factor? Because it affects perception. It affects our perception of the field. It affects our perception of the roles people play in the field. It affects our perception of the peers, our co-workers, the other student learners who are part of the same fieldwork program, who may be placed in the same agency or in another agency. It affects our perception of our own thematic area and the other thematic area. There are n number of examples which we can cite to highlight the importance of why attention is an important factor affecting perception. Largely, there are certain internal factors which affect perception and certain external factors which tend to affect our perception. The internal factors which impact our attention and which in turn affect perception are either our own interest in the field, our own interest in the work of the co-workers, our own interest in the work the agency is undertaking, our own interest in the vulnerable groups which are being serviced by the organization. It also, the second major internal factor is moods. Now, we are very comfortable talking of mood swings because we are in that particular age group. But in the fieldwork practice, moods, swings cannot be a reason for us to enable us or to allow us to affect our perception of people. We need to be wary and mindful of our own moods, of the moods of others. Thirdly, another internal factor is the motives of the agency which services the clients, the motives of the student learner, the motive of the supervisor in enabling you to facilitate your learning, the motives of the faculty advisors, the motives of the School of Social Work. We need to be mindful of all these aspects in valuing the contribution that perception can make in the life of the student learner. The other internal factors are biases and prejudices, which I have mentioned before, which tend to impact our learning and which tend to debar us from moving ahead, connecting with people. When we work with people, whether we are working with individuals, groups, communities, we need to be mindful of our own biases and prejudices, which may tend to creep in. These are largely the internal factors which we need to keep in mind when we undertake fieldwork. The external factors, on the other hand, which can impact us as a student learner, include being wary of the intensity of the event, the occurrence, the problem which may have occurred in the field, being wary, mindful of the intensity of the situation with which a client has approached you in a particular setting, being mindful of the circumstances with which a community leader or a community person may have connected with you at a given point in time. The other major external factor is repetition of an event, problem, situation or occurrence. The third, of course, is to be wary of the stimulus which is being provided for you to connect with the field, for you to take action, for you to take initiative, and for you to enhance your own learning through this process. A novelty range of experiences are made available to students in terms of the fieldwork learning opportunities, and one needs to be perceptive of these situations when one connects with people in the field. So all that we learn in the classroom of working with people, whether it is through casework, group work or community work exercises, which are our core courses, we need to be mindful of these when we operationalize it in the field. So thus far we have introduced to you the concepts of self-development, self-awareness, perception, and now we come to the need to be sensitive to our surroundings, to our peers, to the people we connect with, and to the field in general. We need to appreciate the fact that when we connect with people in the field, it is not a man-made situation. It is a real-life situation for the marginalized and the vulnerable groups and communities, for the individual who is approaching you in an organization or through an organization, for the individuals or the groups whom you connect with in different fieldwork settings. Therefore, the importance of sensitivity needs to be highlighted. A student learner needs to be sensitive to situations and people, to the field and to the context, to the organization, to its mandate, to its workforce and to its surroundings. Why is sensitivity so important? Sensitivity in a student worker enables him or her to develop a holistic understanding of the context, of the individuals who need help, of the groups who approach them, or from the communities which are in the marginalized or the vulnerable situation. Sensitivity implies receptivity, being receptive, and also requires an empathetic understanding of the situation and the people. There are several ways that you may get opportunity to develop sensitivity in the field, whether it is through reading case study reports, whether it's through exposure visits provided to you by the departments or the agency, whether it is through observing professional social workers in the field or observing paraprofessionals in the field, or it is through discussing your own fieldwork experiences with co-workers, peers, professionals and faculty to enable you to enhance your sensitivity. There are quite a few aspects which we are being able to cover when we speak of the conscious use of self, the need for self-awareness, and the need to focus on self-development. Having spoken of the need for being perceptive, having discussed the importance of sensitivity, we now come to the need for appreciating and understanding the value of communication in the fieldwork setting. Communication may be verbal or it may be non-verbal. It may be formal or it may be informal, or it may be a combination of both, depending on where you are and what is the need of the situation. In the fieldwork setting, there may be spaces initially where paraprofessionals and field contacts may connect with you informally, but there may also be a formal orientation to the agency or to the placement setting. The communication which happens 2 days a week in the concurrent fieldwork program or on a daily basis in the block fieldwork program may be both verbal and non-verbal. And it is for you as a student learner to be able to appreciate the importance of both, either or, depending on what is being offered to you, what is being made available to you, and what you can partake of for your own learning. While we are in the process of learning, there are certain guidelines that one needs to keep in mind when one thinks of the need for effective written communication. So, when communication has to be in the form of recordings, reports, minutes of meeting, why is it important? And where and how are we going to learn it? These are aspects which you will be exposed to in the fieldwork setting. Once you are exposed to these aspects, you will begin to value the fact that there is a lot of merit and meaning when you write short sentences, when you write clear sentences, when you communicate clearly, whether it's verbal or written. Use of direct speech rather than indirect speech, because it is you as a student learner who is connecting to the field contacts. It is you as a student learner who is connecting to the supervisor, and it is you as a student learner who is connecting to the client population, to the service user, to the target group. They are known by different names. So the use of active speech plays an extremely important role in the field. When you as a student learner are connecting with people in the field, it is good to use illustrations and examples to simplify and clarify the information that you require or the information that you are conveying to the other stakeholders in the fieldwork setting. It also requires that you begin to arrange your ideas, your thoughts in a logical and a sequential order so that what you say and communicate makes meaning, is valuable, contributes to the organization's growth, contributes to the paraprofessional's work, and equally contributes to your own fieldwork objectives, which are stated in the fieldwork manual of the schools and the departments of social work. When we speak of communication, it is essential that we have discussed the importance of, the value of, and the need for both verbal and non-verbal communication, written and otherwise. But we also need to focus on formal communication and informal communication. As a student learner, it is essential to appreciate that formal communication is an essential part of every formal organization, every formal placement setting, and the value of this formal communication needs to be understood and appreciated. In any administrative hierarchy of an organization where you are placed, what position is held by the head of the organization? What position is held by the paraprofessionals? What is the hierarchical division of responsibility among the professionals in the organization? What is the message wants to be given? What is the channel of communication? What is the manner and the method of communication? All these become extremely important aspects of formal communication. The fact remains that formal communication is concerned with the specific objectives of giving instructions, receiving instructions, giving orders, providing information, setting procedures in place. All of these require to be followed for the employees of the organization. Since you as a student learner are going to be an integral part of the organization, for the year-long concurrent fieldwork program, it becomes mandatory for you to follow these formal modes of communication and to appreciate the need for feedback in this process. On the other hand, there may be spaces in the organization, spaces in the community, spaces with client groups, with other stakeholders, where informal communication would also be part of your life in the field. Formal communication does not always provide room for personal relationships. It is the informal communication among the stakeholders, with the field contacts, with the paraprofessionals, with the community leaders, with your co-workers, which help you increase self-awareness. It will enable you to perceive yourselves. It will enable you to perceive others, and it will help you develop the conscious use of self. Schaeffer and others have included personal issues, appearance, our own clothing and grooming, the behavior that comes across, whether it's valuing others or degrading others in the process, whether it's distracting personal habits or difficulties. All these come across in communicating with others, and all these become essential aspects when we speak of the conscious use of self. We may have a range of personal issues, a range of personal baggage, various kinds of health hazards, physical or mental, which may debar us from connecting with others. It is here that we need to be wary and mindful of, and we need to work on ourselves instead of being preoccupied with our own health, physical or mental, or addictions or personal problems. It is only when we are able to work on ourselves, be mindful of ourselves, that we will be able to connect better with ourselves and others, and we will be able to achieve the student learning objectives which we have set out for. When we summarize this module, we need to state upfront that this tricky area of conscious use of self, this aspect which we tend not to discuss, really requires a lot of dwelling over, introspection, reflection, and this aspect will enable one to grow personally and professionally. Fieldwork education does not operate in professional vacuum or in an educational vacuum. It operationalizes itself through the self, and it's this personal self which is enhanced. When we speak of the importance of the conscious use of self, we need to reiterate that fieldwork education does not operate in a vacuum, and it is the personal self and the professional self which are in tandem with each other will enable you to grow and develop as a mature professional. The context influences the form fieldwork education takes and the position it is assigned in the social work curriculum. I would like to urge you to read the e-text. I hope you have understood the module as it has been explained to you. The references for the same have also been provided in the e-text, and I do look forward to any discussion which we may have in future. Thank you.